Can we just start by establishing where we are now in terms of where troops and tanks and equipment are in relation to Russia and eastern Ukraine? What do we know?
Sure. Well, basically, if you look at Ukraine as a square, it's not quite, but as a square on three sides, you have Russian troops and equipment of varying capacities and sizes. From Belarus to the eastern side of Russia, which is now supporting, of course, directly the breakaway so-called republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. And to the south, you have more troops pressuring areas like Mariupol on the Sea of Azov. You have actually more troops, of course, and a large amount of equipment and, of course, naval capacity based in Crimea. And that threatens the southern flank of the country. So the problem strategically for the Ukrainian government, for the Ukrainian armed forces, is they have to prepare for every eventuality from all directions, whereas any sort of push may just come from one direction, indeed probably most likely the east, but they can't afford to concentrate all their capacity there in case there's a push from the north or from the south. So it's a very confusing strategic situation for the Ukrainians. That's deliberate, no doubt, from Mr. Putin's point of view. But of course, here's the other option. And the other option is right now, Mr. Putin might simply stop. And he might say, OK, I've put enough pressure on for the moment. The world is saying I'm about to invade. I won't. I'll prove them wrong. And at a time of my choosing, then I'll reconsider our position. It's Mr. Putin. We can't predict.
Yeah, and no one really knows because, as you say, we can predict and talk about it all we like, but ultimately he's the one who will make that decision.
Yeah, it's in that swirl of grey matter that's contained within one man's head, and he holds the key to security, not just for that particular little part of Ukraine that's currently we're talking about, but also the whole of Europe, in fact, the whole of the world. And of course, it's even, of course, taken up at the time of the Australian government. Now, our sanctions are virtually symbolic. They are really a statement of intent that, yes, we are supporting Ukraine. We're supporting our Western allies, the United States and Europe. But it's going to have little effect. But it's important that the world shows a united front. And that's Australia's contribution.
Has the world shown enough of a united front, though, Phil? And we've heard repeatedly from Ukrainian officials and analysts saying, actually, there should have been more done on the sanctions front. For example, access to the SWIFT system of international transfers. If that had have been pulled prior to an invasion, that would have sent a stronger signal. Would that have made a difference, do you think?
Well, we don't know because it hasn't been done. But when the West basically, especially the Americans, said we will not militarily defend Ukraine, that removed basically the military stop to Putin. And that has basically opened the door for him to come in and do what he wants. Because, as we've seen from previous attempts at sanctions over Crimea, over MH17, it didn't stop his ambitions. It's not that pause for thought that you might expect a rational person of another government that is going to do damage to their own economy that they would do. But these are different motivations. We're not, as I say, we're caught within the synapses of this one man's head, and we don't know what's flashing there.
Phil, we're now seeing countries bordering Ukraine preparing for some influx of refugees, and we've seen that at the United Nations as well overnight. Warnings of some 5 million potential refugees should this happen. I mean, these are many ifs that we're dealing with here, but again, to add to an if there, I mean, that is a hugely significant number of people.
Oh, it would be absolutely catastrophic. It would be the greatest movement of refugees in Europe since the Second World War, if that came to pass. Now, the Polish government's preparing, the Romanian government's preparing, and of course many other governments beyond the immediate interface with Ukraine are preparing, including Australia. Australia's hinted that we will take people that are wanting to flee that have already got applications in with our government. They'll go to the top of the pile, as the Prime Minister said. But really, again, we're in this sort of realm of speculation. And, President Putin seems to enjoy this this lack of clarity and leaving the West scrambling and trying to unpick and trying to predict. I mean, we've had predictions from President Biden and others in the West that this invasion is imminent. Well, what if it isn't? They look a little bit silly. Their intelligence services look a little ineffective. But again, Mr. Putin might simply be biding his time, or he might order those troops in 30 seconds' time. We simply don't know.
Phil, so many questions. It's great to have you stepping us through all of the particular outcomes, potential outcomes, and to have your analysis. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.